Okay, so let's put more formal ways to analyze the syntax of the grammar in institutional statements. So we are using now more formal language, of course. Syntax is how sentences are structured. If we carefully look carefully at these institutional statements, we can detect regularities. So there is a typology of things, the way they are written. The statements are about certain types of persons who are or not allowed to do certain activities, and if they do something that is not allowed, there might be consequences. So or else is always implicitly or explicitly implied, implicitly or explicitly stated, let's say. Let's now turn to the syntax that we will use to analyze these and other examples. With a syntax, we mean that we can detect common components or building blocks in these statements, and these components have a particular function. Of course, in regular English you have subject, verb, object, or SVO structure. The general syntax of this grammar for institutional statements includes 5 components and is known as ADICO. Attribute, Deontic, which is about duty and obligation in ethical formal discussions. Aim, what is the action that is required in the or implied in the statement. Conditions under which these apply, so that's the action, situation, and or else the penalties that may or may not be involved. So you might compare this to the subject, verb, object, or SVO structure of English. Let's read what these each one of these components is. Attributes, A, so as I said, aim is using I for whatever reason that you can follow up if they explain it somewhere. Attributes, in this book they don't necessarily do that. Attribute is a placeholder for any value of a participant level variable that distinguishes to whom the institutional statement applies. Examples include 18-year-old, female, college-educated persons, or persons with 1 year of experience, or a specific position such as employee or chairperson. You know, we are not being specific, but you know exactly what we're talking about. Getting a driver's license, fishing license, right to drink, or permission to drink in a public place, and so on. Note, attributes are typically defined by a combination of position and boundary rules. So now we go back to our previous chapter about what is your position. Are you an adolescent? Are you an adult? Are you a chairperson? Are you a student? Are you a teacher? And the boundary rules. How do you get admission? How do you get that job? And so on and so forth. Deontic is a placeholder for may, which is permitted, or must, which is an obligation, and must not, which is forbidden. Aim, for which I is used in the ADICO acronym, is a placeholder that describes particular actions or outcomes in the action situation to which the deontic is assigned. The may, must, or must not is assigned to this aim. An aim may include a formula specifying an amount or intensity of actions, or ranges of outcomes, or a description of a process for an action. An example would be harvesting 10 kilograms per day. The aim is typically specified by a combination of choice, scope, information, and payment rules. Okay? Conditions is a placeholder for those variables that define when and where an action or outcome is permitted, is obligatory, or is forbidden. Examples include between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. as the time of a place being open or accessible, in area B where parking is permitted, or after the first fish is dried, as we saw with the example of how salmon season could start after the tribal chief had caught the first salmon and dried it, etc. The conditions are typically specified by a combination of scope, choice, and information rules. We looked at these as well in the last chapter. Or else is a placeholder for the assigned consequence for not following a rule, what may or may not happen. Okay, we will now define the three types of institutional statements using the syntax above. In the same way that a sentence does not need to contain all the possible parts of speech, institutional statements need not contain all the building blocks we have described. The possible institutional statements are: shared strategies contain components AIC, so attribution, aim, and conditions. Strategies can be written as attributes, aim, conditions. Okay, so institutional statements need not contain all the building blocks we have discussed, so you get various combinations. Norms contain, so the shared strategies contain attributes, aim, and conditions. Norms contain elements ADIC, so attribution, deontic, aim, and conditions. Compared to shared strategies, norms include whether an activity is permitted, obliged, or forbidden, but norms do not explicitly include consequences for doing something that is forbidden or not doing something that is required. Right? Don't throw trash here versus recycle. They are two things, right? Norms can thus be written as attributes, deontic, aim, and conditions. Rules do contain all five elements, so norms and rules are different in that sense. So rules come with the O as well, or else. Regardless of how institutional statements are expressed in natural language, they can be written or summarized in the ADICO format: attributes, deontic, aim, conditions, or else. Okay, by writing the statements in a consistent manner, we can then better compare the institutional statements in use in a variety of settings. Note that because language is inherently flexible, the way we characterize the statements below is not the only way to do it. Let's now apply the ADICO syntax to the 5 examples above. So we looked at some signs which included institutional statements. So we'll look at some examples. In order for a person to obtain a hunting license in the state of Arizona, he or she must be 10 years of age or older, a resident of the state of Arizona, and pay a fee, or else no license will be issued. What are the attributes? A person who wants to obtain a hunting license in the state of Arizona. Only this person needs to worry about this institutional statement. A deontic is a bunch of musts. You must be older than 10, you must be a resident of Arizona, you must pay a fee, and such. Aim, you have to be 10 years of age or older, you have to be a resident of the state of Arizona, and you have to pay a fee. You know, there is an overlap, but here action is implied, here obligations or duties are implied, right? Conditions: you must live in the state of Arizona, you must be a resident of the state of Arizona, and there are some conditions associated with how you become a resident of Arizona. You don't have to be born there, you could be working there, you could be a professor in the state of Arizona, and Arizona is mentioned because the authors of the book are teaching at the University of Arizona or Arizona State, and they are in fact immigrants who are living there, but they will qualify as residents if they are working and living there. Or else no hunting license will be issued. You see, or else in this case. Let's look at the other one. A customer must produce a valid ID if asked by an establishment that sells alcoholic beverages in order to be served alcohol. An underage person who tries to buy liquor with a fake ID may be charged with a class 3 misdemeanor. Attributes: here is a customer. Deontic is again a must. You must be, above a certain age and must have fake ID is not possible. You must have an ID that shows your age. You must produce a valid ID. Conditions: if asked by the establishment in order to be served alcohol, you must show the ID, or else no liquor will be served. You may be charged with a class 3 misdemeanor if you took advantage of the liquor service with a fake ID or without an ID. So if they didn't ask an ID, can you just sit there and consume? Well, that's a call you are making, knowing the or else involved, right? All lobster fishers in Maine must not put their traps in the fishing territory of neighboring harbor, or else their traps may be cut loose. Here, all lobster fishers in Maine are the attributes for being relevant to this institutional statements. Deontic is that you must not put your traps in the neighboring harbor. Aim is that you put their traps you put the traps in the fishing territory of the neighboring harbor, which will violate the statement. Conditions here, negative, must not, right? Or else traps may be cut loose. And finally, if you use the microwave, you must clean up your own mess. Here attributes, if you use the microwave. Deontic, you must clean up. Aim, clean up your own mess. Conditions, negative, so you must clean up your mess. You cannot leave behind a mess. Or else is negative in the sense we don't know what will happen if you don't do this. Similarly here, if you do put the traps in the neighboring harbor, traps may be cut loose, but is it something that somebody is always checking, or does it happen if you happen to be caught, or if somebody reports you? Okay, finally, I said finally already, but here we have one more. The person who places a phone call is the one who calls back when the call gets disconnected. The other person doesn't get a free call, or this is just a norm, or so you follow your syntax as to what is a shared strategy, what is a rule, and what's a norm by going back to what we said before. Here the attributes, the person who places a phone call. Deontic is negative, so you don't know what is must or must not. So it just says that you have to call back. Aim is to call back. Conditions applies when the call gets disconnected. There is no or else involved either. So the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language is called syntax. So the syntax of English is what we talked about before: SVO, subject, verb, and what was verb? And object. Subject, verb, and object. How did I forget it? Anyway, let's leave this here and come back and look more formally at the syntax. Okay, this is of course something we are building towards institutional analysis and development before we can go to actual examples and think about how norms, punishments, and shared strategies can be developed for sustaining the commons. Okay.